Thinking Liberty, episode 22.
Welcome to Thinking Liberty, the podcast that explores lifestyles of freedom-minded individuals. Join us as we discuss work, hobbies, health, learning, and more while living a travel-orientated lifestyle. Be curious, be open, be inspired, be free. And now, here are your hosts, Zach and Sarah Varnell.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thinking Liberty. We're here in our mobile studio where we just got into Pennsylvania. Not even sure what the name of the city is. Do you remember, Sarah?
No, we're near Ringtown.
Yeah, that's why we're here, is to visit family in Ringtown.
In Hazleton, yeah. So we're somewhere in the middle of the eastern part of Pennsylvania, and we're just kind of hanging out here. We're going to stay here a week and visit family, and then we're going to move closer to the Lancaster, PA area to visit more family, and we'll be in that area for about 2 weeks, and then we'll be starting to route back south because Zach can't handle the cold.
Yeah, I know we're near the amusement park Knoebels. If anybody knows where that is, that gives them an idea of where in Pennsylvania we are. And yes, it's pronounced Knoebels. I refused to say that for a while until I heard a bunch of actual, people from this area say it. And I'm like, okay, it's Knoebels.
Yeah, he used to, I would say Knoebels, and he'd go, you mean Nobles?
I mean, it just,
no, that's not
in
what
my
I mean.
mind, it had to be Nobles. But no.
Yeah, it's just another one of those things where, the locals know best. But, yeah, so we are hanging out here to visit family. Definitely missing Maine already. I loved it there. All the hiking and the exploring, and we actually left the weekend that the leaves were starting to look their most vivid. So that was a little sad, but it was made for a really cool drive. Getting to drive through Acadia Forest on the way out and seeing all the bright leaves, and even on the interstate going out, it was just gorgeous. I mean, it was
crazy. I mean, the leaves are so bright. I don't think I've ever seen any like that before, except maybe in advertisements for printers. That's the only place I think I've ever seen such vivid reds and oranges and just every color amplified. And I can even tell a difference where the leaves here in Pennsylvania are beautiful, but they're more muted colors. And in Maine, it was very vivid and bright.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're muted, though. They're more they're just darker.
I'm not sure how to describe things.
And then plus, we got here in the rain, so I guess that could make it seem muted, too. But
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, there's definitely a change in the colors, which is cool to see, too, crossing over from state to state, which is one thing that, you get to do when you travel a lot.
Well, I guess it's also not at peak here yet.
That's
so
true.
I guess we have to give it a few
more
days before we can make any more judgments.
Yeah, let's see. So we finished up our last week in Maine. We did a little bit more hiking. The park that we were staying at, we were right down the road from several hiking trails that we saved for during the week because it was easier to get to them right after work, and then did the longer ones on the weekends. But it was really nice to be able to just go, a couple minutes down the road and do trails like the Wonderland Trail, and then there was the Ship Harbor Trail.
Acadia Mountain Trail.
Yeah, that was a longer one that we did, though.
Yeah. And we were within walking distance of the Bass Harbor Lighthouse.
Yeah, so we got to walk it a couple times, and it was just really nice. And then one of our last nights there was the night that the harvest moon was coming out and was going to look the fullest and biggest. And I knew that it was coming, and I knew that it was a thing that people were going to see, but I don't think I completely grasped how amazing it would be. So I knew it was happening, and maybe we'll see it if we see it. But we were driving around, and we didn't want to do too much that night because we had a lot of errands and stuff that we needed to do to get ready to move. So we just went down. We drove around a lot, and then just catching out different sections of the island that we hadn't seen before. And then we went to the seawall, which is near where our RV park was, and we were just going to kind of walk along the rocks there and look at the little tide pools again.
And it was somewhere we had already been, so it wasn't really a big deal for us. We weren't planning, anything too special.
Yeah, we just wanted to explore and hang out and enjoy the nature. So we're there, and then we see a couple of people who are just kind of staring off, and it turns out that they were waiting to see the harvest moon rise. So we were like, well, it's only a couple of minutes away from now. Let's just stay here and watch it rise. And it was so cool because, we were in the perfect spot. I'm sure angles and everything it was for a lot of people, but the light, when it fully rose, the light from it was hitting the water, and it just was in like a line straight to us, and so it was just like the perfect angle to watch it from. And when it first started coming up, you could just see this like orangish, pinkish, bright light peeking up over the top of the trees, almost like a sunrise. And so
it almost looked like a forest fire or something when it first started peeking over, and you could only see like, I don't know, 2 pixels for lack of a better descriptor. But like, it just looked like the woods were on fire over there. It was crazy.
Because they were kind of misty and foggy, right? So, that could be mistaken for a little bit of smoke. I can see that. But then it just started rising, and it was just so bright and beautiful. And we tried to snap a few pictures, but they really don't do it justice. But it was just one of those cool things where you're just in the right spot at the right time to see something really cool and beautiful and magical.
Well, describe it for anybody who doesn't really know what a harvest moon is, because before this, I had no idea. Like, when I know that guy was out there taking like test shots with his camera to get ready for it, and there was some lady out there waiting for it, and I kind of talked to them about it. We both did. And I told them, like, I don't really know what to expect, and they were explaining it a little bit. So can you tell everybody what it looked like?
Yeah, so just a little background too. The harvest moon, it's called the harvest moon because it when farmers were getting ready to, bring in all their crops, this kind of marked the time as like one of the last days where they would have extra time to bring in the crops, because there will be more full moons this year, but they won't be as big and they won't put off as much light. So this was like their biggest day. And so sometimes there are a lot of fall festivals that are centered around this day too. But it just meant that the farmers would have more time because the sun's setting earlier, because it's getting, it's fall, and in winter the days will be really short. So the sun's setting sooner, but then this moon, it was almost as bright as, right before the sunset. So
the moon really looked like a sunset or a sunrise. I don't know, but it was red and orange, and like when we were taking pictures of it with our camera, our phones, the only thing that made it, obvious that it wasn't a sunrise is that the sky was dark.
Another cool thing about this is that most of the full moons throughout the year, they rise around 50 minutes to an hour after the sun sets. So it's still, reflecting light from the sun, but it's just that normal whitish, yellowish color that you see. But with the harvest moon, it rises a lot sooner, something to do with the equinox and everything like that. But
this is not a science podcast.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to do my little bit of knowledge here. So it rises around 30 minutes after the sun sets. So the sun set, but you still have a lot of that pink and dusky light from the sun, and so it's picking up a lot more brightness from the sun than it normally does. So it just emits this golden, it's just orange and pink and red, and it's just this big ball of light. And
especially being next to the ocean, it reflected those colors. It looked like a painting, basically. You could see the moon reflecting in the water, and it made that little trail towards you that you might see in like a Bob Ross painting or something.
Yeah, and if somebody were to try to paint it, it would, you would kind of think that it was a sunrise, because it had the same colors, and really the only thing that was missing was that it wasn't really changing the color of the sky at all. So that was another cool thing, because then you had, the dark blues and grays and blacks of the sky in the background with this bright orange ball. So it was just really cool.
Yeah, so I think we both really loved Maine, and, that was just the cherry on top with our great experience there. And then we got to kind of just witness that by accident, when we were just walking around, kind of doing something that we had already done before and just kind of chilling out on one of our last nights there. And I know Sarah already wants to go back. In fact, she never wanted to leave. But
yeah, we're going to own a cottage over there sometime. That's going to happen. Yeah. That's life goals.
Yeah, and it's definitely some place that I want to visit again. And, when we get back up there in the RV, I want to visit New Hampshire and Vermont, definitely, because we didn't hit those this time.
Not in the RV, yeah.
Not in the RV, yeah. We did go to New Hampshire ourselves, but we'll definitely have to dip back into Maine, too, and especially Mount Desert Island, which I think is where Acadia is. So.
Yeah, and so Zach and I had been staying in Bass Harbor, Maine, and we kept talking about how we were staying near Bahama, but we never actually went and visited until our very last night. We finally went out and we had a date night, and we went out to dinner and walked around, and it's definitely a really cool city. It definitely is a livelier vibe than the other side of the island, which I guess is why they call it, where we were staying, they call it Quiet Side, because it is very quiet.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And I'm actually not even sure if we could have stayed in Bar Harbor, because I did notice on the way there was like a bridge that was like 10 or 11 feet tall. So definitely an RV couldn't fit under it.
Yeah, that would have been a little scary.
Surely there is another way to get there. But if we had been staying in Bar Harbor and I just put the address into my GPS, it would try to take us under that. So
maybe loop around the other way or something like that.
I'm not sure. But I guess that's why there's so many RV parks in Bass Harbor, even though people are probably on the island having heard about Bar Harbor.
Yeah, and so it was really nice, and I forget where we went for dinner, but it was decent. The environment was cool.
Finback? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Dorsal fin, I don't know.
Obviously, we weren't impressed, but it was still fun. I mean, the drinks were good, and our appetizer was good, and, we had a good time with each other's company, and that's all you need. And then we walked around a little bit and checked out some of the shops, and they were actually having a First Friday's artist walk. So a lot of the art galleries were staying open late and offering wine or snacks for you to go through and look at their art pieces. And we bought a couple little prints to try to hang up in the RV somewhere if we can ever get that situation fixed.
Yeah, hanging stuff up in a home that moves and shakes and simulates a earthquake every couple of weeks is not the easiest thing. Yeah, we've tried, and plus our walls aren't very thick, so it's hard to hammer anything into
sometimes,
it.
Yeah. Like, what if there's a wire or a pipe behind here and we puncture it? Yeah. So you do have to be a little careful. But yeah, we tried museum putty first.
Which
I think
that just gets hot and melts.
Yeah, and that just never works. Because even if the inside of your RV is cool, you can touch the wall, and the wall might still feel warm. Because, like Zach said, they're still pretty thin. So, the heat is on the outside, and it just seeps through the wall a little bit. And then we tried Velcro, like heavy-duty industrial Velcro.
Well, the Velcro itself is really good, but the sticky that they put on the Velcro to adhere it to the wall is not so good.
Yeah.
So the Velcro is never going to fail, but the sticky will just fall right off. So
well, I mean, sometimes it lasts a pretty good while. Like that one painting, it lasted, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before it started getting loose, and then maybe another month, and then it finally slid on down.
Still though,
but
if you were talking about a house, that wouldn't be very impressive.
Yeah, and a couple of like really small things that weigh almost nothing have had no problems at all. So that's been good. And then we just recently asked another RVing couple about what they do, and they suggested they'll actually put screws into the Velcro to help it be more sturdy, I guess, or they'll use rivets when they can. So we'll definitely have to look into those options and just try to figure this out, because I want to hang my artwork.
Yeah. So we left Maine. We're in Pennsylvania now. Not only was I a little bit scared about staying in Maine too late into the fall, don't want to be too cold or get icy or snowy. I mean, I'm a southerner. I don't know how these things go. But also, everything was closing.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of joking about that. I was like, we should just stay another week. But then everything would have been closed.
Yeah, well, the
grocery store was switching to shorter fall hours. And so it was already a push to try to get there after work. It was going to be even harder.
Yeah, that was funny, too, because we went to the grocery store at, 7:10, and saw that they had just closed at 7. something like that. And then other people were in the parking lot too, doing the same thing as us and like being disappointed that they're closed. And I look at their license plates. It's like they're from Florida, they're from Virginia. It's like everybody who lives in Maine knows what's up, but
Yeah,
it's all the tourists that are disappointed.
not only is it getting dark sooner, but you're in Maine, so it's getting darker sooner than other places in the country even. And I don't know that this has anything to do with it, but there were so many deer. Like, as soon as it started getting a little bit dusk, I mean, even sometimes it was broad daylight, and they were just everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that people don't really want to be driving that much at night if they can help it.
Yeah. And we even wanted to stay a week maybe in New Hampshire, and we looked around Concord, Manchester, and Portsmouth, places like that. And just about every place was closed or closing before we would get there. I think I found one RV park that was going to be open for a week that we wanted to be there, but it seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. So not like I'm against being in the middle of nowhere, but didn't really, I didn't feel like there was anything for us to do in that area. I didn't know what would, if we got there, if there'd just be nothing to do except hang out in the park or no nearby cities or trails or parks or anything. So we just came down to Pennsylvania, and it took us 2 days of driving, and that was not fun. I think we're still recovering from being tired, even though we were just sitting driving the whole time. And I know even Ollie's tired just from the drive.
I think he's still a little mad at us.
Yeah, he was upset because he has to go in his kennel when we drive or else he gets sick. So he was not pleased about having to do that, even though we took plenty of breaks, but he doesn't understand.
Yeah. But it was definitely an experience. So you get to see a little bit more of our planning thought processes there. But so for today's episode, we're talking with Sarah Williams of Tough Girl Challenges, and it's a really good interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it. One of her key things that she talks about is, overcoming your fears or overcoming your inner monologue that tells you that you can't do something. And so I thought it kind of ties into what's going on a little bit right now. And so I wanted to say too that, our hearts go out to everyone that's been affected with the shooting in Vegas and with the natural disasters with the hurricanes in Puerto Rico and Florida and Texas. And it's just, so sad and so tragic to see all of these things happening. So definitely, if you're able to help, contribute in any way, definitely do that. But I wanted to say too that, when things like this happen, it's so easy to just say, well, things aren't safe. We can't do things because it's not safe. If you've been looking at the news lately, my Google Now feed loves to give me articles about traveling, and it loves to do scary ones. So it's been talking about planes whose engines exploded and fires on the runway and, RVs crashing and, engine repairs needing and RVs on fire and all these things.
Those are the worst. It does it for me too. It's like, oh, you're interested in RVs. Well, let me tell you about this one that flipped over.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about this one that just fell apart. It's not what I want to hear.
Yeah, and those things happen, and it's easy to just say, well, it's too hard, it's too scary, life's not safe. If we go to, you go to a concert and you're putting yourself in danger. You go to the movie theater and you're putting yourself in danger. There's all these car accidents, and so it's easy to not pursue your passions or your dreams because you feel like it's unsafe. I mean, my parents are always asking me to please be careful, and they say crazy things sometimes, but, it's just because they're afraid and because, they're paying attention to all of the articles and the news stories about all these scary, crazy things that happen, whether it's man-made or a natural disaster, and it can limit you. And so what I wanted to say is that, you just have to take the chance and live your life. You can't let what somebody else did or the risk of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, whether it's for, like I said, a man-made event or a natural disaster like the hurricanes. You just have to get out there and live, and because otherwise, kind of what's the point? If you're not experiencing things and exploring and, doing what makes you happy and what makes you feel alive, then what's really the point?
And I would say, too, don't let people overblow the risk for you. Because, I mean, even though these things are tragic and, people get caught up in them and they woke up that morning having no idea that was going to happen, the chances of that happening to any individual is very low. Not the hurricanes. I mean, the hurricanes are pretty common, but you also see them coming. But for these events that you don't see coming and nobody sees coming, really, that just doesn't happen to most people.
Yeah, and you have to think about, the chances of something happening to you when you are doing your everyday life are more common. There are car accidents all the time. And
that's what I worry about the most.
Yeah, other drivers, yeah.
Well, just anything. Whenever, people tell me to be safe traveling, I think maybe a lot of times they have in mind, like, crazy people, random events, natural disasters. But what I think of is, we're going to be doing a lot of driving. That's going to be dangerous. And, I don't love driving that much, which is weird for somebody living in an RV. And the RV especially, I feel like it's a harder thing to drive, which maybe gives me more respect for it, which could make it, maybe a little bit more safe if I fear it a little bit. But even just driving the car, I'm way more likely to get hurt driving my car than I am to get killed by a natural disaster or, a gunman or something like that. So
yeah, the very first car accident I was in was like 2 minutes away from my house. We had just left the house and we're going to the grocery store, and my mom was driving, and that was my very first car accident. Things happen.
Yeah, it just seems like really the only surefire way to be completely safe is to do nothing, say nothing, just be nothing, never leave your house. And I don't think for anybody listening that's really an option. So if you're listening, you're at least interested in travel and adventure. And with that is going to come a little bit of risk, even though I don't think I've ever really felt unsafe during our 2-year RV journey and even our trips abroad. So I think, and partly it is overblown, but at the same time, I think you need to be aware of the risk, be realistic about it, and, take any steps you can to make those, risks minimalized, like, drive safely, drive a safe car, have some means of protecting yourself if, somebody does do something crazy to you.
And just be aware of your environment and your surroundings.
Yeah, that's the big one.
And do a little bit of planning. If you know that you're planning on moving to a location with a lot of hurricanes, make sure that your house is ready for it, and have an evacuation plan in place.
Or if you're in an RV like us, be ready to go.
Yeah,
there's been times where we're watching the weather, like, do we need to get out of here? So
yeah, we raced ahead of a snowstorm once,
and we got narrowly missed by a few not hurricanes, but big storm fronts that were bringing in tornadoes.
Yeah, so we nearly missed those too. So yeah, you just have to be ready to do some preparation and be prepared and be aware. And also, if you have family members that are concerned for you, don't just dismiss their fears, because, like we said, it is possible. But also at the same time, just try to reassure them, let them know what you're doing to be prepared, and let them know that, to be aware and that you're monitoring your surroundings. And that's one thing that Sarah will talk about too. But just, it's easy to not do anything, and it's easy to listen to your anxiety and listen to the fears and, think that this is how to be safest. And you might be right, that might be, but it's better to get out there and do what you want to do with your life, and don't let your inner monologue stop you. And so Sarah will talk a little bit about that. She actually worked in the finance industry for 8 years, and then she decided to quit her job so that she could decide, what she wanted to do with her life. And she spent about 18 months traveling the world. She climbed Kilimanjaro. She backpacked around South America. She went to, was it Sweden, and did a ski season?
Somewhere snowy.
Sweden or Switzerland. And she, took that time to really figure out what she wanted to do.
I think it was Switzerland.
Yeah, and then she set up Tough Girl Challenges, and she has the Tough Girl podcast. And she wanted to motivate and inspire people to get out there and do things. Don't listen to those who tell you you can't, especially yourself. And just get out there and explore and adventure and do something that scares you. So yeah, we'll let her tell you more about her story.
Yeah, so definitely don't let this last 5 minutes get you down, because her interview is much more positive.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Very inspiring too. So
I was super inspired. Yeah, I was sitting there like, oh gosh, I'm gonna tear up any second now.
Yeah.
But it was really good.
I'm surprised to hear you didn't. All right, so let's go into our interview with Sarah Williams of Tough Girl Challenges.
So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you. I initially reached out because I saw your post about hiking the Appalachian Trail, and so I was super excited to learn more about that. That's always been something that I've kind of wanted to do myself. I've hiked sections of it, but never the whole thing. And then you sent me more information about yourself, about hiking Mount Kilimanjaro and backpacking in South America, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we're talking to you. So thanks again for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I can't wait to talk about all these things. Sometimes I forget what I've done, so it's like, yay.
Yeah, I've definitely been there too. So why don't you tell us a little bit of background about yourself, about, where you live, your hobbies, things like that.
Yeah, well, I suppose it really started. I didn't really grow up doing this. I sort of followed the traditional career path, and I went to school and I went to university. I then headed down to London and had a corporate job for about 8 years. And I got to 32 and just thought, do you know what? This is not the life I want to be leading. I don't want to spend the next 20, 30 years sat behind a desk. So I decided to quit my job, and that's when I had a year out, and I ended up going to climb Kilimanjaro in Africa, the highest mountain in Africa. I headed over to South America to backpack for about 4 months. I then did a ski season, went to Switzerland and worked as a chalet host. And it was sort of during that time that I really thought, well, what do I actually want to do with my life, which was to travel, have adventures, and to also motivate and inspire women and girls, which is why I started up Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating, inspiring women and girls. And what I do is I do big challenges, like running across the Sahara Desert, climbing Kilimanjaro, and through hiking the Appalachian Trail in 100 days, in order to motivate and inspire other women to think about what challenges that they could do. Not necessarily to go and through hike the Appalachian Trail in 100 days, but for them to think, okay, well, if Sarah can do that, why can't I sign up for that 5K? Why don't I go out for that hike this weekend? Why don't I go and do some overnight camping? So it's just a sort of a platform that I'm building really to motivate and inspire other women and girls.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely inspired. You said you reached 32 and you felt like you needed to change your career path, and you didn't really want to be doing behind a desk, for the next 20 or 30 years. Was it a hard decision to was it scary for you quitting your job? What was your process for that?
I think it just suddenly sort of evolved, because I realized that I actually spent more time planning my holidays than I did actually planning my life. And I'd never actually really thought about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. And at one point, I almost felt as though I was existing. I wasn't really living my life, and I just sort of got on this trajectory. And moving down to London, and then you're getting promoted, and then you're moving up, and then you get a bonus, and you get promoted, and then before you know it, I've been doing it for 8 years. And I think it was just this one day, and I was at work, and I was on like the 30th floor looking out. The skies were grey, I was grey, and deep down I thought, I am so miserable. And I'm a really positive person, and I think I've been trying to put such a positive spin on it for so long that I just got to that point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And it was difficult. And actually the time period after I left, it was really, really difficult, because I think a lot of my self-worth had been tied up in my job, in my title, in, working for the company that I worked for. And I got a lot of almost my self-confidence from doing that, because I was very, very proud of it. And then suddenly when I didn't have that job anymore, I didn't have that status, and I was, doing all this traveling, it was challenging, and more so from other people's perspective of me. So, they'd be looking at me and judging me, and it was actually a really difficult time period to go through, because also I was lacking purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And when I didn't have that, I felt as though I was just sort of wandering and not really achieving anything and not really giving back. But that all changed when I decided actually Tough Girl Challenges is what I want to do. So it was definitely more of a journey, and it wasn't something that was just I made the decision straight away. It was something that did take time, but now I can look back and I do sometimes think I wish I'd done it earlier and earlier and earlier. But that is life, really.
Yeah, I think that's, so relatable to a lot of people. It's people end up getting stuck because it's, you changed pretty much your whole identity. I mean, you changed where your purpose was and what your direction was, and it's a really scary thing. Did you find that you got a lot of support from family and friends, or was it kind of taking some time to convince them that you knew what you were doing and that this was the very best thing for you?
I think I did get support, but it was support in a way that it wasn't needed. In such, for example, as soon as I left my job and I decided to take this time out, I had friends sort of emailing me saying, "Oh, check out this job, you'd be awesome at this." And even after I told my parents what I wanted to do, there'd still be comments of like, "Oh, you'd be so good at doing that." And it was actually, it took quite a while for me to sort of say, actually, look, I don't want to go back into doing that. This is what I'm happy doing. So there definitely was a transition period, but I think it was also from me as well, as in sometimes you don't necessarily want to I know that sounds weird, but it's almost like no, I can do this by myself, I don't need your help, I want to figure this out on my own. And that can actually be quite challenging. But I think now that I'm 2.5 years into this, or maybe 3.5 years into this journey, people can see what I've built and what I've achieved, and I think they almost feel more comfortable and confident. Because generally what happens is when you're sharing your dreams or explaining to people what you're doing, generally they will feed you back their own personal fears, but what about X, what about Y, and won't you need this, and and you're this age, etc., etc. And actually sometimes you've got to realize what they're talking about is their own personal fears, and it's got nothing to do with me. And actually that takes a bit of time, getting used to it. When people sort of say, do you not find it scary, giving up your job or wanting to go back to university or leaving behind paid employment? So it's definitely a transition period.
And when you first left your 9 to 5, did you have something to fall back on, maybe like a side job or anything like that, or were you just kind of taking the leap and going to live off and travel off savings for a while?
Exactly. So I did have savings. So I had enough money that I didn't need to work for 18 months, basically. And my job wasn't like 9 to 5. It was more like 6 to 11.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it was quite. I worked in banking, so it was quite like a stressful environment. But luckily, I did have the financial resources behind me that I didn't need to work for those 18 months, and that did give me a cushion. But what I have ended up doing is actually moving back home with my parents, and I think that was quite a hard adjustment. So I did that, I think, when I was like 34. It's like suddenly moving back into the family home while I build up Tough Girl Challenges, and that's actually been quite challenging in itself. But I'm also incredibly fortunate that I've got the support of my parents to enable me to do what I want to do. So I wouldn't have been able to head off to through hike the Appalachian Trail and go run across the Sahara Desert if I didn't have their support and wasn't able to live at home rent free. And I don't contribute towards the food or the bills or anything like that, but that is allowing me to grow and develop my business. So I know I'm incredibly fortunate and lucky to be in that position.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I think it's always good to have a good support system that you're able to rely on and fall back on, because, it's hard to follow after your dreams and pursue your passions and goals. And if you're doing it all alone, sometimes that can make it pretty impossible. So what was the first place you went? I know you've mentioned off several different activities and journeys and adventures you went on. What was the first thing you did after you quit your job?
Well, actually, the first thing I did is my brother actually lives in Australia. So I actually headed off to Australia and went and spent a month over there with him and his wife, and just basically just chilled out, because I don't think I'd realized like how stressed I was. And so for the first couple of weeks, I'd still be waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my goodness, has that been done? Do I need to do that? And I think it took me a really long time to sort of unwind. And during that time, it was just a case of getting to read books and listen to podcasts and sunbathe and just almost take this holiday and this time out. And then I was very fortunate. My sister had said to me, says, oh, would you fancy climbing Kilimanjaro? So we'd had Kilimanjaro booked for a number of months. So I came back to the UK and then headed off with my sister to go and climb Kilimanjaro, which was incredible. It takes about, I think we took about 7 or 8 days to go and do it. But that was very life-changing, going through that experience and pushing my body so hard and just having to realize that actually I can achieve these things if I put my mind to it and I have the right positive mindset. Because there was one point where on summit night, and we were walking, it was pitch dark, we had head torches on, and the head torches were just lighting up like just a meter in front of us, and we were just slowly walking up, and it's going to be about 6 or 7 hours in the dark, walking up to the summit. No music playing, it was just you and your thoughts. And my thoughts, I found at that point, were so negative. They were just, Sarah, why are you doing this? Why do you think you can summit Kilimanjaro? You're so tired, your feet hurt, you've got a headache, you can't do this, you're not strong enough, why don't you quit, why don't you turn around? And it was this negative self-talk, and I could feel like my steps getting shorter, my breathing getting harder. And I realized there was no way that I was going to be able to reach the top of Kilimanjaro if I continued to let these thoughts take over and dominate my mind. And actually, I did make this switch, and I started being kinder to myself and saying, actually, do you know what, Sarah, you can do this. Keep walking forward. You're stronger than you know. You've done the training. You're fit. You're healthy. You can make it to the top. And I think that was my first sort of key learning about having self-belief in yourself, developing mental resilience and mental toughness. And I suppose it just really got me thinking about some of the other different challenges that I'd done. And I wanted to share that story with more women and girls. And I ended up going into a lot of girls' schools in my local area and speaking to them about some of my different travels and adventures. And it was when I was talking to these young girls and women about their goals and their plans for the future, it became really apparent to me that many women and many girls didn't have goals. They didn't have a plan. They didn't know what they wanted to achieve. They were just basically existing. And I really struggled with that. And I was trying to sort of understand why that was. And when I looked around, I was flipping through like a newspaper on the table, and I thought the paper was just basically full of men. There was no female role models. And it's when you start opening your eyes, you start thinking, hold up, our young women and young men are growing up without female role models. And instead of sort of complaining about it, I thought, well, what can I do to make a difference? And this is where sort of Tough Girl Challenges evolved really, and started into the podcast as well as the blog, because I wanted to increase the amount of female role models, and I wanted to share other women's stories, other incredible women who've gone out there and achieved these incredible feats, whether it's climbing Mount Everest or swimming the English Channel or running marathons or doing triathlons, and just making sure that their stories get heard and that other women hear about them.
Yeah, wow, you are hitting on so many great points. I love it. So the negative self-talk, that is such a great lesson to learn. I know it's something that's super hard to overcome. It's just there in your head, and it's just the first thing, that kind of pops up when you're struggling with a new challenge. So it's really, I think, kind of a lesson in self-discipline to learn how to switch that into positive. You have to be really conscientious about it. So it's amazing to me that you were able to do that while you were pushing your body to the limit while climbing up Kilimanjaro. What sort of training or preparation did you do for climbing?
So actually, to be fair, I used to do a lot of running. So for me, it was actually running, it was yoga, Bikram yoga. I'm a massive fan of getting in the hot and the heat and sweating it all out. And also just generally walking as well. So going out into the Lake District in the UK and out into Wales, into Snowdonia, and just walking, that was sort of my training really. And actually, I suppose as the years have gone by, I've actually got more and more serious about my training. So now I do a lot more weightlifting and a lot more focus on building up muscle and strength. And it also sort of depends more on what challenge that I'm working towards. So I did a boxing challenge, so there was lots of, boxing and arm work for that, and then training for the Appalachian Trail. That was, very different from training for the Marathon des Sables. So it's my training now is almost much more specific to the challenge, and I've definitely learned a huge amount from when I initially started doing these challenges.
So I heard that Kilimanjaro is one of those areas where you have microclimates, where you might be hot on one side of the mountain, then you get somewhere else and it's snowing, and you get somewhere else and it's raining sideways. Is that your experience, or was it not like that?
No, definitely. So you end up walking through like all of these different types of terrain, from jungle, jungle. I'm trying to remember the names of like the foliage, but you do go through like all of these different stages. And there's snow at the top, there's glaciers at the top, there's sort of this like what I call almost like a lunar landscape, and there is different climates. I mean, I was very, very fortunate with the weather, so we had like a little bit of rain, but generally it was pretty great, to be honest. I think I went at the end of March, but I interviewed another girl who actually, she headed off to summit Kilimanjaro on New Year's Day. That was one of her goals, and I think absolutely amazing thing to do. What a great way to start the year. But she dealt with like torrential rain the whole time that she was there. So every single day that she was walking, it was just constantly raining. But Kilimanjaro is like it is a freestanding mountain, so what that means is that anybody can go and climb it. So I think the youngest person who's climbed it is maybe about 8 years old, and the oldest person is maybe about like 82. So it's one of these mountains that anybody can go and do. You don't need to have technical skills to do it. It's more about just having the right mental attitude, and also having sort of a high level, not necessarily a high level of fitness, but being fit enough to be able to walk for 6 or 7 hours each day.
Yeah, so I've read that altitude sickness can be a big problem on Kilimanjaro as well, and that it can really affect anybody, no matter what your health level or fitness level is. Was that something that affected you a lot, or were you pretty blessed in that area?
I was actually pretty fortunate, and it didn't really affect me that badly. But what was really interesting is we had, there was about a group of 8 or 9 of us doing it, and we had some sort of young, very fit guys doing it. And then we also had a couple of couples, and there was an older lady who maybe was in her 50s. She was a larger lady. And I think generally, if you looked at the group, you would have said, oh, well, it's going to be those young guys who are going to get to the top, and I'm not so sure about this other lady. But actually, this is the thing about mountains. This is the thing about mental resilience and mental toughness. You can never tell by looking at somebody how tough they are, and also how the altitude is going to affect them. So when we got to Gilman's Point, we had a couple of the guys who got to the top. They'd been vomiting on the way up, and then their legs just went out from under them, and they needed to turn around and head back. We walked past another guy, and he decided that he was pretty tired, so he was going to lie down and have a little sleep on Kilimanjaro at the very top, which at high altitude, which is not the right thing to do.
Oh,
so
goodness.
obviously we had our porters, waking them up, like, get down the mountain. So it can affect people in different ways, and I was actually very fortunate that it didn't really affect me.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories with climbing large mountains where people feel like they just want to lay down and take a small nap and they'll be okay. But the thing is, people who do that typically don't get up from those naps, or they'll get up and it'll be worse than when they laid down.
Exactly. It's not recommended. It's the best thing to do is just get back down the mountain. That's why you want to do it with, professional guides, and just make sure that you've got the right people in place who are able to support you when you do a challenge like that.
And then I see that you also went backpacking in South America. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe what some of your destinations were?
Oh, absolutely. South America is just incredible. So I actually booked myself a one-way ticket to Lima in Peru, and then a return flight from Rio. And I just spent the time traveling around. I mean, Peru was an incredible place to start. And we ended up, I had a friend join me for the first 2 weeks, and we ended up going up to Cusco, and then Machu Picchu, which was just amazing, like the history, the Inca culture, just amazing. We did have to travel by buses, so we were spending sometimes about 24 hours on a bus, but we headed down through Bolivia into Chile. While I was in Bolivia, we went across the salt flats. There was also something called Death Road, which have you heard of Death Road?
I don't think I have.
So Death Road is in Bolivia, and what it was a road that used to join the capital city La Paz to sort of the other towns, but the road was incredibly narrow, so you could generally fit maybe one big truck and one car would be able to pass by, and this road just had the most horrendous amount of deaths. It was like kamikaze driving. Trucks would just go off the side of the road. It's
oh my gosh,
steep. There are waterfalls, and eventually the government decided, this is ridiculous. So they built like a brand new road. So they left this old road, Death Road, and a couple of entrepreneurial tourists decided, I know what we're going to do. Let's take tourists on a mountain bike down Death Road. So I ended up cycling Death Road, which is where you start at the top, and it has to be one of the scariest things I've ever done. You're going down this road, you start looking over to the cliff to your left hand side, and there's just this massive sort of drop going down. That was pretty petrifying, but a fun experience to do. I also headed down to this place in Chile where they had the national park, and they had a live volcano called the volcano Vilacari, and climbed a live volcano. That was super amazing. One of the best things about that is how you get down. They basically give you these bum boards, and you just slide all the way down. So it was about a 7-hour trek up to the very top of this live volcano, and then you slide on your bottom on the bum board down, taking maybe about 45 minutes to slide down to the bottom.
Oh my gosh, that sounds really scary.
It was amazing. But this is the thing with South America. It's such an incredible continent. There's so many different things to see, like Iguazu Falls and heading out to Rio and seeing Christ the Redeemer. And I also went and did like paragliding. It was amazing. But I think one of the key things about it, which I found particularly useful, was the fact that I was away from my friends and my family, and when the normal society, so nobody knew me. I was just able to really get some really good quality thinking time in and make decisions for me. It wasn't about what other people would think about me, and it wasn't about whether I was doing it for other people. It was actually getting that free time to really think. And sometimes you don't get that because life can just get in the way. And sometimes you're so busy going from A to B to C to D and, just getting things done that you don't really have time to think about what it is that you want and what it is that you want to do. And those 4 months were incredible. So yes, I was doing these amazing things and having these incredible experiences, but the most beneficial time for me was when I was sat on those buses, just writing in a journal and writing down, what did I want from my life? What did I want to experience? What were the things I wanted to do? How did I want to live? What were my values? What were my beliefs? And that was almost the starting point really of deciding, how am I going to spend the next 15, 20 years of my life? Did I want to go back into paid employment? Did I want to go into the charity sector? Did I want to stay working in England? Did I want to go abroad? Did I want to do my own thing? And actually, sometimes these things take a while to develop and unfold, and you never necessarily know what it's going to be, but taking that time out is just so worth it.
So do you have any tips for journaling that might help people get their thoughts down in an organized manner and kind of, figure out what it is that they need to do?
Yeah, this is probably going to sound really weird, but don't edit yourself when you're writing, because it can be so easy to write and sort of think, oh, that's not spelt properly, or what am I trying to say? Just start writing. Even if it doesn't make sense at first what you're writing, it's just getting it out of your head and down onto paper. I also find doing it in the morning is really, really beneficial. And if you're struggling to journal, even if you just Google great journal questions, it'll come up, it'll give you hundreds of questions, and just bam, what's the question? What do you believe is true, or where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 15 years? And just start writing. And I think that's my biggest tip, is just don't edit yourself, and also just start doing it. That's the key, because a lot of people, or what I found is a lot of people just fail to take the first step. They never start doing anything, and they overthink things, and they procrastinate, and they maybe spend too much time doing the researching, the planning, and trying to get it right. There's no right way, or there's no wrong way to journal. It's just doing what works for you. You know, for some people I know love bullet point. Some people I know love bullet point journaling, so they just do bullet points, and that for them works. Whereas other people want long and free flowing. Some people want to handwrite, other people want to type. So there is no right or wrong. It's just doing what works for you.
Maybe I should try the bullet points. That definitely hit close to home, because I am one of those overthinkers. I'm trying not to be, but I definitely tend to overanalyze every little thing that I do, and I know there's a lot of people that do that too. And it's kind of one of those daily things, but like you said, it's just good to just start and just do it, just jump in. So it's good advice. So you mentioned too that you went to Switzerland and did a ski season. So were you staying there and kind of working the ski season, or you were just out there hitting the slopes?
No, I was out there working. So I was working as a chalet host. So it has to be possibly one of the most physically demanding jobs I've ever done. It was definitely work hard and play hard and ski hard. And that was from the end of November through to April 2014. And I actually ended up writing a book about it, because I was in my early 30s, and everybody else I was working with were 18, 19, or just graduated university. So it was quite an eye-opening experience. But again, it was something that I'd wanted to do. I'd wanted to get better at my skiing. But when you go on ski holidays, you get, maybe a week in the mountains, you start to get good, or, you start to get better by the end of the week, and then it's over. And, being able to spend sort of 6 months I was out in Verbier, was phenomenal. I improved my skiing, I met awesome people, and it was just a great way to spend 6 months. So but I was working during that. I definitely spent a lot of my money by this point. So that's, by the time I finished my ski season, I was actually out, and that's when I ended up moving back home with my parents.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. We'll definitely have to check out the book that you wrote about it, because we have a lot of friends that are very into skiing, and we've gone once, and I definitely want to go again. But like you said, it's kind of hard to stay good at it when you're kind of going back and forth from it all the time. So how did you go from, climbing mountains and backpacking to going to where there's snow and working at a ski chalet?
It was just actually all sort of part of the plan, really. So because I wanted to do it, I'd arranged my job at being a chalet host before I'd even left for South America. So that was, when I came back from South America, I knew I was going straight off to go and do the ski season. That was just because I wrote down, what did I want to do during this sort of year out, and I made my decision, and then I just went out and applied, got a job, did the cookery course, and then before you know it, you're out there in Switzerland.
So you kind of made a plan of the things that you wanted to do, and then kind of planned it out and booked different things. I'm assuming this is part of your journaling experience, but did you have any specific goals for yourself other than, just kind of finding peace with your purpose and quitting your job?
To be honest, actually, that's a really, really good point. Is one thing that I've always done is actually write down my goals. So I have, a piece of paper with what I want to achieve. But actually, I'd also, this time, I think on this sort of this gap year, or, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, it was actually also, I was trying not to plan too much, because I am such a planner, and everything is planned down to the last minute. I actually wanted to take this time just to almost go with the flow a little bit. So I had the big picture, travel South America, so my flight in and my flight out, and work a ski season. But apart from that, it was actually really quite flexible, and I sort of wanted to see what would happen, what opportunities would come up, and just take advantage of them. But I do write everything down. For me, I find that's just a great way of processing everything.
Cool. And then tell us about the Marathon des Sables that you did. I've heard that's really the hardest foot race on earth. So how did you get interested in doing that, and what led up to you actually taking part of it?
Yeah, well, so I'd had Tough Girl Challenges was a website now. It was live. I was blogging on it. No one was reading my blog at that point, and I just thought I need like a big challenge. If I'm going out to schools and companies and talking, about challenge and change and pushing yourself and getting outside your comfort zone, then as well as being able to talk the talk, I've got to be able to walk the walk. So I looked around for what would be a big challenge to do. And the Marathon des Sables is something that I have heard about, and I never thought I'd get the opportunity or the time off to actually train for it and to go and complete it. And Marathon des Sables is basically French for Marathon of the Sands. It's running 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert. It's known as a multi-stage ultra endurance race, and you're self-sufficient. Your water is rationed. You need to carry all your own food. They do provide a rough shelter for you at camp, which is basically a black piece of tarp over the top, and it's very sort of rustic and getting back to basics. And it's been around now for, I think it's coming into its 33rd or 34th year, and it is incredibly tough running across the desert because of the temperatures, and there's lots to look into. And I just thought it would be an incredible challenge, and it was also a challenge that scared me. When you get that feeling in the bottom of your stomach, it's like this nervous energy, and you have those little thoughts of doubt, like, can I do this? Am I going to be fit enough, strong enough? And actually, those thoughts, those feelings in your stomach, you need to be able to experience them, because that's when you know that you're really pushing yourself. That's when you know that you're going to be stepping outside of your comfort zone. And having that little bit of fear, that little bit of excitement, is what's going to drive you, is what's going to motivate you, is what's going to help to sort of train you to get yourself, fit and ready for it. And, for Marathon des Sables, by the time I got to the start line, I was the strongest and fittest and leanest that I'd ever been. And it was I never really want to say like life-changing, but, it really did push me to my limits on... You run pretty much a marathon every day, but on the 4th day, you have something called the long stage, which is when you run a double marathon. So you run 52 miles. And I've run marathons before, so I always knew that I could get to 26.2 miles. I knew I could do that, but I'd never gone further than that. So the long stage for me was the big psychological challenge. And with a lot of these things, it is physical to a certain extent, but actually it's the mental mindset. It's that self-talk, it's being positive, it's being focused, it's about breaking things down. And that day still has to be one of the highlights, I suppose, of my whole life. Because sometimes I look at different things and think, how am I going to accomplish this? How am I going to achieve this? I just don't know. I don't know where to start. And I'll think back to that day and think, Sarah, you ran 52 miles. And I think I did it in about sort of 18 hours. Started at 8:30 in the morning and finished just before 2 o'clock. And it was brutal and it was hard and it took me to very, very dark places. But I finished it. And that's amazing to know that when you can set yourself a big challenge, you can go after it and you can achieve it. It really does help to build your self-confidence and self-belief in what you can do. And that will spread across to other areas of your life. That's why I'm so passionate about getting women outside their comfort zone, because I know it will add so much value to their whole life.
So I butchered that pronunciation completely. So it's Marathon des Sables?
Marathon des Sables, yeah. Don't worry. Like, everyone just calls it MDS.
All right. So the thing I know that we originally wanted to interview you about was the Appalachian Trail experience you had. And then we found out all this other crazy stuff you've done. We had to ask about that too. So was the Appalachian Trail sort of another tough girl challenge for you, where you felt like you just wanted to do it to be able to inspire people, or was there a bigger purpose for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've been building my business for quite a long time, and what everyone can see on social media is they can see me going to the gym and doing running and fitness and exercise and leaving this incredibly healthy, amazing lifestyle and working my own hours. But I don't think people really realize what was going on behind the scenes, which was I was actually still working 15, 16-hour days, but I was loving everything that I was doing, and I just wanted to do a longer challenge, and also to get away from, it sounds weird to say, but to get away from the social media side of things and actually just get some time back in nature. And I'd heard about the Appalachian trail, and generally most people do it in 5 or 6 months, but I thought, there's no way that I can take 5 or 6 months off. It's just not practical. It's just not, I can't do it. And so eventually 100 days sort of like popped into my head. I knew I was going to be going back to university in October, so I knew I needed to finish in September. So starting in June, I thought, well, I can do this. I can organize myself. I can preload 15 podcasts or 3 months of podcasts, so the podcast is still running while I'm away, and then I can go out and achieve it. But it was also about getting other women to think about, well, what could they do in 100 days? Not saying they have to go out and, bash out 22 miles a day for 100 days, but what would be the one thing that they could do? So is it journaling every single morning? Is it doing 10 minutes of meditation? Is it going on a walk around the block? Is it giving up coffee or cake or, something along those lines? And I just wanted to use it as a platform to inspire other women and other girls. I mean, I was actually vlogging my journey and sharing it. So people, I think sometimes there can be this misconnect, and people can think that it is always glamorous and amazing, and that when you do these challenges that you don't have dark days and you don't have tough times, and that, oh, well, it's easy for her because of X, Y, and Z. And so one of the reasons for vlogging was to show people that, I am not a phenomenal runner. I'm not a phenomenal walker. I'm just, your average woman, but I'm very focused and very committed. And while I was vlogging, I think people could actually see that, this was not a glamorous through hike. You get to see all the tears, all the high points, all the low points, what my daily battles were, whether it was just struggling to walk the final mile, whether it was dealing with bears and snakes, whether it was actually just being miserable at points on the trail, or dealing with the rain and actually just feeling very, very low. And I think people got to see the real side of what it's like to do a challenge like this. And I'm just glad that I could bring people on the journey with me, because I'm very aware that not everybody can take off the time to go and do challenges like this, or maybe don't want to, but they still want to experience what it would be like. And I'm just very, very, very privileged to share that with them.
So is this vlog still up on your website?
Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel. So we had, I would say we had not technical issues, but I'd never really vlogged before. And I had a guy back at home called Finn Jones, who's amazing, who's doing the editing. But one of the biggest challenges was trying to upload the footage. So the vlog at the moment is up to only up to day 67, because for the final couple of weeks, all I was doing, I wasn't stopping anywhere. All I was doing was walking for sometimes up to 14, 15 hours a day. And I had no capacity to even think of social media or uploading footage. So it's still being uploaded. And I have to say, I'm quite excited about some of these videos coming out, because towards the final push, the final few days where I was having to bash out 33 miles a day, 30 miles a day, walk through horrendous terrain, deal with horrendous weather, it gets emotional. And I'm not going to lie, there are lots of tears, but it's it was definitely an experience. So you can follow along. I've also released a podcast episode about it as well, so if anyone's interested in learning more about it.
Well, I am definitely interested, so I'm going to have to go check those out probably right after this. So were you hiking the whole 100 days solo, or did you go with a group, or did you just kind of meet up with other hikers on the trail?
So I was solo and unsupported, so I was doing it by myself. And because I was moving so rapidly, that was, I think, not one of the issues, but I would basically be going past people. So I hiked with a few people for sort of a couple of days. But generally if the men were going quickly, they'd be a lot faster than me, and I wouldn't be able to keep up with them at their pace. And then with a lot of the women who may be going at my pace, they maybe didn't want to go as far as I wanted to go. When you sort of say, oh, actually, well, I need to hit 26 miles today, and everyone they're doing big miles of, say, 12 miles is a big day for them. It was very difficult to find people at the same level, and also because I was moving so quickly, it was generally just me hiking a lot of it sort of by myself. But I do like my own company, and I also wanted to use this as an opportunity as well, just to almost have that time out again to just reevaluate my life, where I am, what I'm doing. Am I pleased with my decisions? Am I pleased with how everything is going? What are my plans for the future? And just and just to take that time out, really just to have that quiet time. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it is so true. Just getting back to nature, just spending time in the woods, in the fresh air. It was just amazing.
Was it kind of scary or lonely hiking it by yourself for the 100 days? Or
I was someone not scary, but there were moments where I was scared, but it was more like I was in the White Mountains and I thought I could walk an extra 4 miles in the towards the end of the day, but it got dark a lot quicker, and then suddenly I'm on the top of the White Mountains and I couldn't see the blazes, I couldn't see the cairns. That was scary, but that was also my own fault for putting myself in that situation. But I was never fearful on the trail. I was never fearful of being by myself. I was never fearful of doing it. If certain situations took time to get used to, I didn't really like at the start, I was a little bit apprehensive being in my tent by myself, but I soon got over that, and being at a shelter on my own. But then towards the end, you're just absolutely, well, for me, I was like absolutely just fine with anything that the trail could throw at me. And sorry, there was a second part of the question which I missed?
No, I mean, I guess just maybe, how you coped with being by yourself for that long.
Yeah, I mean, the Appalachian Trail is actually really sociable. There are a lot of people on it, whether they're walking different directions, and you could definitely tell when it was the weekend because you'd have the day hikers out there. And one of the things I think about any long distance trail, it is about the people that you meet, and the trail magic that I saw and the trail angels were incredible. And it was just the kindness of strangers. People would be out there and you'd be chatting to them at the shelter in the evening. They'd find out what you were doing, and people would want to give you food and support you. And so I was never lonely. But I don't know if that's just because I really like my own company.
So what was a little bit of the culture like on the trail? Did it kind of surprise you from normal everyday interactions?
No, it was just really, I think because everyone is out there for their own reason. So whether people had quit their job or they'd retired or they were section hiking, everyone was on their trail, walking their trail, walking their hike, how they wanted to walk their hike. And everyone had their own reasons. And there was almost this sort of bond between hikers. It was almost like you understood what they were going through. You could relate to people out there. And it was just, 9 times out of 10, it was friendly, it was inclusive, and people were welcoming. And there's something that's said, it's called the trail will provide. There's sometimes, I'd run out of water, and then you'd ask somebody like, oh, where's the next water source? And they'd be like, oh, are you out of water? And I'd be like, yes. And they'd provide you with water or food or, these random things that you may need. I ended up twisting my ankle quite badly, and a lady gave me like an ankle wrap, and my right knee blew up, and somebody else gave me like a knee support. So things like this just happen on the trail, and I think it's because everybody knows what everybody else is going through, and it is just an incredibly supportive culture and place to be. And I think any other hikers would agree. Everyone's looking out for one another, even if it's just sort of saying, oh, by the way, there's no water for the next 14 miles, have you stocked up? Or by the way, there's a tree which has fallen over here, or oh, there's trail magic coming up here, or what, there's a lot. It's a community, and it was just an amazing thing to experience. I think one of the only, not regrets I have, but one of the things that I would like to do is, because I was moving so quickly, I did miss out on sort of like trail families and hiking with other people and really building those really strong friendships and relationships. So I think that would be, if I was to do it again, I wouldn't do it again, but I would do it maybe slower, and so I could take more time to really connect with more people on the trail.
Yeah, I guess part of your journey and experience was just proving that you could do it within that certain period of time. You said you twisted your ankle. Was it a bad twist or sprain? How did that affect the rest of your journey?
I'd gone over on my left ankle maybe every day for like 4 days, and it was starting to really sort of hurt me. And there's actually a YouTube video on it, because the next time I've been saying to myself, you know what, I need to show people this, to say, look, these things can happen when you're out on the trail. So I've actually do have a vlog of it, not the vlog of me falling over, but the vlog of the aftermath, where I'm covered in dirt, I'm just sobbing on the side of the trail. And I was actually really worried about my ankle, because you can see like video footage of it, it's completely swelled up. But I didn't have time to stop. So I was still walking 20 odd miles, 22 miles, 23 miles every single day on a very swollen ankle. And I was in sort of, considerable pain while I was doing it. But I think, that teaches you something else. I fell on the trail. I was by myself. I was alone. And then you start, well, what are your options? Do you stay sat down and just stay there and not move? That's not an option. Sometimes, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what the pain is, you have to get up and you have to keep on walking. And I think that's almost a lesson that people sometimes need to hear, that life can be tough, it can get you down, and it's great to have a support network in place, and it's great to have a team of people around you. But actually, you need to be able to rely on yourself first of all. And I think that's incredibly powerful, that actually sometimes situations like this can happen, but you've also got to have a plan in place for what you would do if it does happen. So one of the things that I did is I did a lot of I did something called what if, in terms of my mental preparation. So I had a sheet of paper, and on the left hand side I wrote down all of the potential issues and problems that I could deal with on the trail. What happens if I fall over? What happens if I run out of food? What happens if I run out of water? How would I deal with bears? How do I deal with lightning? And then on the right hand side, while I was in a nice, safe, comfortable environment, I could go through and write down, well, how would I handle it if I did trip over? What would I need to do? How would I handle it if I ran out of water? What would I do if I ran out of food? Etc. And then when something like that, God forbid, does happen, then actually you've already thought this through in a nice, safe, secure environment. So it's not coming as a shock to you, and your brain's going, okay, so you've fallen over, you need to get up, you need to keep walking, you can do it, get up, let's get on this. And that's a great way of preparing yourself mentally for any challenge. And you can do this for any challenge or anything that you're a little bit scared of. It's just go through and think about all the solutions ahead of time. And just to say, that's not to say you're going to cover every single what if that could happen to you while you're out there. But even if you get 70% of them or 60% of them done, at least it just gives you that understanding that you've done your preparation and you're as prepared as you possibly can be. But the other thing from going on adventures and challenging yourself is the unknown and the unexpected. And it's about learning to deal with it.
Cool. So you said that you were solo and unsupported. So how did you restock on supplies and food? Was it just you getting a ride or walking into town to do it all yourself? Or were you able to order stuff to come to certain points?
No, so I was basically resupplying on the trail. So there are a number of towns that you can walk through on the Appalachian Trail, especially over, I'd say the first sort of 1,000 miles, which makes resupplying relatively easy. So I wouldn't go further than a mile off trail normally. And so I was resupplying at like garages. So my food definitely changed. I was also doing it stoveless. So I wasn't actually cooking any food on the trail. So it was a lot of like protein bars and nuts and tuna and chocolate bars and Snickers and candy. Basically, my whole diet was horrendous while I was on the trail, and I was eating stuff that I'd never normally eat. I put on a stone in weight before I went, but I basically ended up losing about 2 stone. So when you see the videos at the end, I am skeletal basically. I just lost so much weight. That was actually one of my concerns. But if you saw the amount of food that I was eating, I was spending about $100 every 4 days on food when I was doing resupply. And when I would get into towns, I'd be having a big meal. But that was one of the challenging aspects. Later on, as I was heading up towards Maine, I was having to hitch rides into town to do my resupply. But again, you have these trail angels. I remember I was sat outside the supermarket. It's about 12:30 or no, 12:45 in the afternoon. I was thinking, right, I'm going to go and have to hitch a ride. And it's not something I particularly like doing. I really do have my wits about me. I'm very conscious, who am I getting into a car with, or, all of those thoughts, being a single female. And, touch wood, I never had any problems. But I was sat outside the supermarket. A woman walks over to me. She's like, oh, are you through hiking? I was like, oh, yes. She said, oh, do you need a lift back up to the trailhead? So sometimes you didn't even have to put your thumb out. You'd have people sort of seeing that you needed a lift and they would help you out. But yeah, hitching rides into town, getting resupply, and then getting back onto the trail as quickly as possible, because I had 2 0 days, and if I got to a hostel, to stay the night, I'd be gone the following morning pretty early, in order to get these miles done.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've read a lot about through hiking, is that people are you really get the opportunity to see a kinder, softer side of people, because everyone's so supportive and helpful, and like you said, offering you water and helping you find it, and giving you rides into town and back, and people will sit at entrances to trails and have food or hot cocoa or coffee or something for people that are walking through if they live nearby. So it's just one of the things that I love about reading about the trail, and I've read a couple books about it, and I just love everything. Someday I'll do that.
Someday, absolutely. I mean, it's not to say that, I was very conscious as well. I'd try not to camp within a mile of a road. I wouldn't leave my pink Crocs outside, for example, to say, oh, look, it's a female in the tent. And I also wouldn't leave my backpack outside so people could see that it was a female backpack. So there are sensible precautions that you need to take. You do need to have your wits about you. And I don't know if this is just something that I've got from traveling, but I think I'm always evaluating people when I'm meeting them, in terms of, are you safe to be around? Do I want to be around you? And sometimes you meet people who maybe not your cup of tea, and you think, I don't feel 100% here, so I'm going to walk and carry on walking for an extra 4 or 5 miles. And I think that's just trusting your gut and trusting your instinct. And I think that's, something that everybody should be doing to make sure that you feel comfortable. And it didn't actually happen on the Appalachian Trail, but I have been in situations before when I've been traveling where I've thought, don't feel comfortable. I don't care if it's rude. I'm getting up and walking away. So it's not about sticking to society's nice rules. If you don't feel comfortable or safe in a situation, you get out of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such good advice, and something to remember for anyone that travels alone, or even, Zach and I, we travel all the time, just the two of us, and, we're always on the road and in new situations, and, we're hundreds of miles away from anyone we know. And so it's just always good to kind of listen to your instinct and be aware of what's going on. And Zach preaches that to me all the time, to be aware of my surroundings, and no head down on your phone, be aware of what's going on behind you and around you.
So did you have an Appalachian Trail nickname at all?
Well, I did, but I didn't really like using it. So because my Twitter handle is like @tough_girl, so I'm sort of known as Tough Girl. But I didn't want to be writing in the diaries, oh, tough girl. And it's also because I didn't really want to be tracked. I get quite paranoid. So my trail name was actually, I just basically shortened it to Tough. So it was just like, hi, I'm Tough, do the fist pump. And yeah, that was it.
That's pretty cool. So from all of your adventures and things that you do, how do you pack for these, or plan, what equipment you need, whether it's hiking Mount Kilimanjaro or backpacking through South America? How do you prep and make sure that you have the right equipment you need?
I think I'm actually quite relaxed about a lot of the equipment side of things, because I think having the best of everything doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do these challenges. But generally, you can see what you need. You can go through and you can see the big four. So your tent, what's your sleeping arrangement, what's your backpack going to be, what's your trainers going to, what footwear do you need? And as soon as you start researching it, whether it's watching YouTube video, reading books, being in Facebook groups, speaking to other people who've done the trail, you start to get a sense of what the majority of people are using and what would work best for you. And there is opportunity for trial and error and trialing things out. but I didn't necessarily have the time to do that with a lot of my equipment for the Appalachian Trail. So for example, with water filters, I was just like, well, Sawyer, it's a good water filter. It was going for the squeezy one. And I could have debated it. Do I want the live straw? Do I want to have the gravity one to hang? And sometimes what can happen with all of this, so, what tent do I go for? Do I want to have a hammock sleeping situation? Do I need trainers? Do I need boots? Do I need inner soles? Is people can get so sucked into the equipment and the detail and the planning that actually they can spend 2 years planning a hike, and actually it's a form of procrastination, and it's a way of feeling as though you're achieving something, but actually you're not. So I'm actually very relaxed about equipment, and I read different reviews, but I make my decision basically, how much money do I have, what can I afford? Yes, I'd like to be able to afford the lightest and the best of everything, but sometimes it came down to, well, actually I've only got X amount, so therefore I'm going to be using those. So for example, with my shoes, I use the same shoes I use for Marathon des Sables for the first 200 odd miles. For my tent, I borrowed a tent. A girl lended me a tent. I did buy my backpack, but I actually could only afford to buy that about 4 weeks before I left to go on the trail. And also, I think you've always got to build that into your planning, that sometimes with equipment, things are going to go wrong. Things may break, but you don't need to carry everything with you, because you'll be able to get it on the trail, especially if you're going somewhere like the Appalachian Trail. There's plenty of road crossings you can hop off if you know if it's an emergency, and go into a town and purchase what you need. So I suppose I'm just quite relaxed about my equipment. But did I need to replace anything? No. The only other thing I added in, which I bought, was it started to get a lot colder than I expected, so I ended up buying a sleeping liner. That was the only additional equipment that I bought when I was going along. I did have a head torch, but most of the time I just used my iPhone for light, and that was it really.
So with vlogging and everything, did you carry battery packs with you to be able to charge your phone?
Yeah, so I had one battery pack, which was a bit of a luxury really. So I was filming with the GoPro Hero 5, and initially I also had like the Karma grip, so you could get this really smooth footage, and it weighs maybe about like 3 pounds, and it was so heavy that I ended up I had a lady who was going to meet me at the end called Jojo, and so I ended up sending that up to her and just had the GoPro in my hand to film. And my charger would give me 10 good charges, so I'd get about 5 for my phone and about 5 for my GoPro, but I also had a spare battery for my GoPro as well.
Okay, and then I think at the beginning you mentioned that, you started off your whole journey by going to Australia and relaxing, and that you had some time to read books. Did you take any books with you on your adventures and journeys, and, read anything that really inspired you while on the trail or while backpacking?
On the trail, I have to say, I wasn't doing anything apart from sleeping and walking. And I know that sounds insane, but I was I'd have my breakfast maybe when I was walking, so I'd be eating as I walked. I wasn't stopping. When I get into camp,
you had a lot of miles to hit.
Yeah, so when I get into camp, though, I wasn't carrying anything extra. I mean, one of the things that I do is there's a great website called Blinkist, which is where you can read all these incredible books, but they're sort of done in like 15-minute chunks, so you can basically get the summary of the books. But one of the best books that I've ever read and would recommend to everybody it's called The Slight Edge, and I'm going to forget the author's name, but it's called The Slight Edge. And what it is, it's about these incremental improvements and about doing the right thing every single day. And big things don't happen overnight. So I spent pretty much, I'd say, 96 days of the trail thinking, I'm never going to get there, because I couldn't see that I was making progress. And it's actually one of those things that you can sometimes struggle to see that you're making headway in anything, whether it's podcasting and download numbers, or your new job, or when you're training for a marathon, or you're going hiking and you think, I'm never going to get there. Whereas actually, if you just keep doing the right things every single day, it's going to build and build and build and build. And that, for me, that book was just phenomenal, because it really does teach you that actually sometimes it's the daily habits that you do every single day which are going to amount to a big change in your life, and it's also going to make the difference between achieving your goals and not.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to add that to my reading list then. It sounds amazing.
Definitely. And check out Blinkist as well, because that's a great way to consume a huge number of books really quickly.
Okay, definitely. So looking back, I think we're kind of running out of time, so we'll kind of start to wrap this up. But looking back after, all of your adventures and your journeys and everything that you've learned, and going back to being on the 30th floor of your office and working your way up, is there anything that you miss or wish you could hold on to from life before this, or are you just 100% over it?
No, I think the only thing I miss is possibly my paycheck coming in every month. That if I could maintain that while doing what I'm doing, that would have been incredible. But you have to make sacrifices, and you've also got to decide what is important to you. And for me, I'm just so incredibly happy living my life how I'm living it, and getting to do these incredible challenges and to really follow what my passions are and what my interests are, and having this freedom of choice about how I spend my time. I am incredibly lucky, but it's also the life I'm living now is a result of the decisions that I made years ago. So I think it was November 2016, I first wrote about wanting to do the Appalachian Trail and wanting to go back to university. And, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford to do it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to take the time off. But sometimes making that decision and just having a goal and having a plan, I look back now and I don't even realize like what I've done and what I've achieved, because it's almost become so normal now, and I've almost not forgotten about it, because that sounds wrong, but it's just like, like I've hiked the Appalachian Trail and I've run the Marathon des Sables and climbed these mountains and done this incredible traveling, but it hasn't all been sunshine and roses. There's been a lot of sacrifice to be doing what I'm doing, but that sacrifice was totally worth it, and I couldn't be happier.
So if there's somebody listening who maybe has a demanding job that they're getting burnout from, and they think your story is interesting and maybe be interested in quitting their job and traveling, what sort of advice would you give somebody who might be embarking on a similar journey to yours?
I mean, I think the first thing is, as I say, just because you hear a lot of people who quit their jobs and then go traveling and everything else and starting their life, it doesn't mean that you have to quit your job or stop working completely. Because actually, for some people, working, having structure and having that routine and having the security of having a regular paycheck is what they need to do. It also depends, on your situation. Are you married? Do you have children? Do you have a mortgage? I don't have family. I don't have like when I say like immediate family, like I don't have children. I'm not married. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have anything tying me down. So I think it depends a lot on your own situation, and it's all about just making the decision for you. And all I'd say is just take your time, think it through, and just really think about what it is that you want to do. And it's not necessarily the life for everybody, because although it can sound incredibly glamorous, going through hiking and traveling and doing all of this, at the end of the day, it's still work. So for me, my social media is my work, and sharing my challenges on the vlogs and writing blog posts about it and doing the podcast is all work. But it's just something that I enjoy a huge amount and just love doing. But if it's something that you want to do, then go for it. Right. I mean, I think we've talked about it before, writing down your goals. Write down exactly what it is that you want to achieve. If you can, save up, have a buffer, and just see how you can make it work for you. By also thinking about what's your definition of success, like what do you need to have a successful life for you, and just understanding what your purpose is and why you're doing it. Just because I think there's almost like this bit of a craze at the moment where more and more people are handing in their notice and quitting their jobs, as long as it's something that you want to do and not just because you feel that everybody else is doing it, then I say go for it and just get after it, and yeah, just live your life on your terms, and yeah, get after it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's something that, we're finding is a repeated message from pretty much everyone we've interviewed so far. I mean, it's just, there is no one right way to live your life, or to travel, or to experience everything that the world has to offer. I mean, there are so many ways to travel. There's so many ways to find your purpose and your path. And like you said, you just have to kind of think about it and, plan and make your goals and decide what it is that you want to do with the rest of your life, and then just do it. And it's just so cool to hear all these stories and to see, how your life changed so drastically. It's just so inspiring and so amazing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that happen on the Appalachian Trail, or one of the things that you hear all the time, is hike your own hike. So hike your hike, and you can obviously you can apply that to Appalachian Trail, but you can apply it to your life. And just exactly like you said, it's about doing what's right for you, and it's not about other people. It's not about the society. It's not about pressures. It's about you being able to live your life. So hike your hike, and yeah,
that's amazing. Hike your hike and live your life. Yeah, it's just so amazing, how different people find their own path. I mean, it's, like you said, it's just, you have to find what's right for you and just go after it and pursue it.
Absolutely.
All right, so before we wrap up, tell us all about the Tough Girl podcast, any other projects you have going on, your social media, and where everybody can find these things.
Well, the best place to go is toughgirlchallenges.com, and on there you'll find links to my books, to the blog, to the podcast. And the podcast was started on the 4th of August 2 years ago, so I'm literally like 2015, and I started with 4 episodes. I don't even introduce myself in the first couple of episodes. It is a project of love and passion, and what I do is I interview incredible women who've done amazing challenges, whether that is women who swam the English Channel, ran the full length of New Zealand, done through hikes, climbed mountains, have run a marathon. It's all about sharing their knowledge. We talk a lot about self-confidence and self-belief, getting over your own personal fears. For the 100th episode, we had Cheryl Strayed on, who wrote the book Wild, which was amazing. Wow. Because I'm such a massive fan of her, and she through hiked the PCT. But it's all about motivating, inspiring women and girls. You can listen to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google, Stitcher, all the normal places. So please do go check that out. And like I mentioned earlier, I do have a vlog out there on my YouTube channel, which you can find at Tough Girl Challenges, and you can come and see my 100-day through hike. I think we're up to day 67 at the moment, but you can watch the high points and low points. You can see my preparation videos beforehand. You can see, if you go to my website, you've got all the blog posts about the equipment, the cost, the mental preparation. So there's a ton of information out there, and you can find all my social media channels. So yeah, so come and check out toughgirlchallenges.com.
All right, great. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up, or is that it?
No, just say a massive thank you to you guys for having me on. I really do appreciate you letting me probably waffle on far too long about, my different challenges and adventures.
I loved hearing about it.
Oh, no, we loved having you on.
Oh, good. I'm super pleased, because it's been awesome. It's been awesome to talk to you guys.
Yeah, I'm super inspired. So thank you again so much.
All right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Sarah Williams. I hope maybe she inspired you or motivated you to get out and do something. And even if it's not something as crazy as running the huge marathon she runs, or, climbing Kilimanjaro, I think her words and her actions are inspiring to at least get out and do something, and maybe she goes for the craziest, the hardest stuff, but I don't know if I'll be doing that anytime soon. But I'll still be doing something, and I know that, her voice will be in the back of my mind encouraging me to do stuff like that, even though I'm not a tough girl.
You could be. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that interview with Sarah Williams, so definitely go check out her Tough Girl podcast. I also did want to point out that I think there's a tendency in our generation, and maybe even the past generation, for people to...
And what generation is that? I have no idea about the demographics of people who listen to this show.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Mine and Zach's generation,
Yeah.
which we're both 20, so you can figure it out from there.
We're 20?
Yeah, it was a joke. So now I've lost my train of thought. Yes. So I think that there's a tendency in our generation, and maybe even the past generation, for people to look for reasons to brush off or discount other people's accomplishments or achievements. And, I like to say too that in our circle of friends, we haven't seen that or experienced any of that. So we're very grateful for that. But, if you look at comment sections of articles or blog posts or YouTube videos, people are always like nitpicking about this thing or that thing.
That's the worst of humanity, though. Never look in comment sections.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Well,
But
maybe if it's like your Facebook friends, that's one thing. But if it's like YouTube, just don't even go there.
yeah. But everyone wants to be so independent and do everything like 100% on their own, and you're not successful unless you've done it by yourself. And Sarah pointed out that she's been really blessed and that she's lucky that she's had her parents and she was able to move in with her parents so that she could focus on her passions and her dreams. And that's amazing. She knew what she wanted to go after and she knew what it would take to get there. And she did it. And so she's focusing all of her efforts and energy into this Tough Girls venture. And she's got her podcast and journaling and her YouTube videos, and she's creating a service and creating these challenges for girls to go try and complete and pursue, to prove to themselves and the world that they can do it. And, more women and girls need that kind of inspiration. They need that kind of push and motivation to say, if Sarah can do it, so can I. And so that's what she's doing, and it's amazing, and it's so great to see that she has this support system. And I mean, you can kind of tell in her work that she has a support system like that, because I think it's really hard to be somebody who's trying to give support without that. So I think, don't discount support systems, and I'm just very impressed and inspired by her whole story.
Yeah, well, I'm glad she did it because, it seems like maybe the choices where she could have stayed in her job that she didn't like. She could be living on her own in probably a pretty nice place. Or she could
be very high up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't a nobody. She had a good job.
She was getting promotions.
Yeah. Or, she could go out and pursue her passions like she's doing. She could live cheaply. And I think that's a great alternative. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that she's always going to be living cheaply. Seems like she's striving for a medium where one day she'll be living her passion and making money off of it, which I think is what we're all about here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that's everybody's dream.
And there's got to be some build up to that. It doesn't happen tomorrow. So I love to see that she's actually striving for it. I have no doubt in my mind that one day Tough Girl Challenges or Tough Girl Podcast, all these things are going to be paying her bills, and she's going to be, monetizing her passion, which I think, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words. I think we all would love to do that. So
yeah, and I think people look for an excuse to not chase after their passions and their dreams. And, it could have been so easy for her to just say, I can't do this because, how will I pay for my apartment? How will I pay, for food? How will I pay for utilities? And just have said, I can't do it. I'm just going to have to stay at this job. Or, it's crazy to take time off work and spend, these savings and live off of them and not have any backup plan for income. It would be too crazy to do that. I can't do that. And, for some people, maybe they can't. But definitely, if you have something that you want to do and it's your passion and you want to go after it, look at the reasons as to why you're giving yourself why not. And think about, is this really a reason, or am I just trying to find an excuse?
Or are you trying to appease other people?
Yeah, or meet other people's expectations.
Uncool. You don't want to be the guy who, lives in, a one-bedroom apartment because that's not cool enough for you. Yeah. But I think it's awesome that we've had, Sarah and other guests who purposely seek out the cheapest way to live so that they can spend their money on their passions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you were talking about Steven, who was basically living in a closet so that he could afford to travel, which meant he couldn't bring people over, so it was kind of a difficult thing for him. But, you have to make sacrifices for what you're passionate about, and you have to go out and pursue those dreams, and if you don't, they're not going to happen. So I hope that's one thing that you took away from Sarah's interview, and definitely go check out her podcast.
Yeah, as always, please check out the guest projects. Check out Tough Girl Challenges on Facebook. I think she's on all sorts of other social media too. So, and then
we're linking to it in the show notes page.
Yeah, it'll all be on the show notes page at thinkingliberty.com/22. And then check out Tough Girl Podcast. And while you're at it, as always, please give Thinking Liberty a like, a follow. Search Thinking Liberty on either Twitter or Facebook, and you'll find us, or we're at ListenTL. So please, like us, follow us, like Sarah, follow Sarah, and check out the show notes page at thinkingliberty.com/22 for any of the resources you may have missed during, the interview or the long intros and outros we've now done. So.
Yep, and if you believe in inspiring and motivating young women and girls, then definitely check out Sarah Williams' Patreon page as well, Tough Girl Podcast, and we'll link to that and consider donating to that as well.
So that's it for this week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Liberty. Subscribe to the show for free on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher at thinkingliberty.com. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, articles by Zach and Sarah, and more. We'll see you next time.